Established in 1986, the National Building Museum's Honor Award celebrates individuals and organizations that have shaped our heritage, defined our culture, developed our communities, and crafted our built environment. This year, the National Building Museum recognizes Mrs. Laura Bush and the National Trust for Historic Preservation as the 28th Honor Award recipients. As a young girl growing up in Midland, Texas, Laura Lane Welch spent a great deal of time at the local courthouse.
I remember ours in Midland very well because when I was little, the public library was in the basement. And so my mother and I would go to the county courthouse and walk down into the basement to check out our books every week from the library. And of course, that's where George and I went to get our marriage license.
But it was as First Lady of Texas that Mrs. Bush gained a true appreciation for the critical importance of these historic civic buildings.
When George was governor of Texas, one of our old historic courthouses burned. And we saw how important they are, both to our communities, but also how many things they house. All of the archives, the birth and death and marriage records are in our courthouses, and many of them were in much need of restoration.
Mrs. Bush became actively involved in saving the courthouses and the small towns that surround them. She raised money for public libraries through her Texas Book Festival, and she traveled across the state in support of the Texas Main Street program, a partnership between the Texas Historical Commission and the National Trust for Historic Preservation.
The state of Texas has, I believe, more Main Street communities than any other state in the nation. She would open every one of those new Main Street programs as they came online.
While serving as First Lady of the United States, Mrs. Bush expanded her preservation efforts.
All First Ladies are considered stewards of the White House and have that temporary privilege to be a custodian of the most important national landmark in our country. And Laura Bush took this seriously and loved the opportunity. She also helped during the Bush administration launch Preserve America.
Preserve America provides promotional benefits, technical assistance, and matching grants to help local communities protect their heritage. To date, more than 760 communities across the country have benefited from the program.
Preserve America allowed communities to have the chance to work together, everyone in the community, to save their historic sites. It's so important that we spread the word everywhere, to every corner of our country, about how important our built environments are and how important it is that we save them. We've lost a lot of our old historic buildings over the years. They've been torn down for new downtowns. Our main streets, of course, many of them have closed up, and it's really important for us to figure out new uses.
Mrs. Bush also co-chaired Save America's Treasures and provided leadership to the National Park Foundation and the Trust for the National Mall. And in 2011, Mrs. Bush was voted onto the board of the National Trust for Historic Preservation.
In February of 2013, myself and the other representatives from the National Trust traveled thousands of miles throughout the Lone Star State to raise awareness about Texas courthouses and their imminent need for more funding for their preservation.
In honor of Valentine's Day, the National Trust's I Love Texas Courthouses campaign heart-bombed 20 counties across the state, including Wilson County.
I'll always remember when one of the local event organizers turned to me and said, "I can't tell you what it means for the National Trust for Historic Preservation to come all the way to Floresville, Texas, and tell us what we have here is beautiful." And to this day, that has always been my personal mission statement, to inspire people around the country to take a look around themselves and realize that what they have is beautiful.
The National Trust for Historic Preservation was chartered by Congress in 1949. In 1951, the National Trust acquired its first property. Since that time, the National Trust portfolio has grown to 27 historic sites. In 1971, the National Trust opened its first field office in San Francisco. Today, there are 13 trust offices across the country.
We are a laboratory for solution-based preservation techniques. It's through those field offices that we take direct action to save historic places.
An important part of this local strategy is to connect the American people to preservation.
We're doing that in two ways. One is through a very concerted outreach to a younger demographic, which our market research shows is very interested in historic buildings, but not at all connected to the formal preservation movement. At the same time, we want to diversify the way we're talking about preservation to make sure that all Americans see their stories in the work that we're doing.
Under Stephanie's leadership, we're focused like a laser on the National Treasures Program.
The National Treasures Program is a new program at the National Trust where we are taking direct on-the-ground action at sites that are threatened around the country. These are sites that are nationally significant.
Our goal is to have a revolving portfolio of up to 100 national treasures at any given time. Today we stand at right around 40, so we're adding national treasures to our portfolio. But we wanted to do the same kind of work, draw visibility, engage people in the conversation about preservation, and get something very specific done.
One such treasure is Hinchliffe Stadium in Paterson, New Jersey.
Hinchliffe Stadium is the only baseball park in the United States designated a National Historic Landmark. It is also important because it's the only nationally significant former professional Negro League baseball venue in the United States. The goal of the National Trust is to initiate a $1.5 million stabilization project which will start in June, July of this year.
The National Trust has a new program called Hope Crew where we bring young people to learn hands-on how to preserve historic sites, and so we'll have a cleanup day utilizing this new Hope Crew there in Paterson, New Jersey.
We're expecting about 500 volunteers and it's going to be a pretty exciting project.
Both our honorees share a passion for preserving the places that tell America's stories. They also share an understanding that to be effective, preservation needs to be a coordinated effort between local communities, interest groups, and governments.
Many communities can't afford to save their historic sites, and I think it's really terrific when we, as all Americans, come together and use taxpayer money to help communities protect those very, very valuable sites.
The National Building Museum salutes Mrs. Laura Bush and the National Trust for Historic Preservation as the 2014 Honor Awardees.